There's one. Ooh, slab. He inhaled that jig. Isn't that a gorgeous fish? Well, I had the one nice one on. You didn't see it? What a gorgeous fish.
Let's go fishing. People, when you're in the mood, let's go fishing. Well, it's just me and you. Head on down to the fishing hole. Grab your hat, get your pole. Let's go fishing when you're in the mood.
Canadian Sport Fishing, brought to you in part by Rapala, premium fishing gear crafted from experience. Duckett Fishing, pro-driven. Raymarine Electronics, Raymarine, simply superior. Pro Sports Boats, tame the waters.
We've got a gorgeous evening. We've got about an hour and a half before we have a sunset. And it's about not quite the middle of April. And I'm going to be doing some crappie fishing with my wife, Barbara. Now, the one thing I got to tell you about crappie fishing, it's all about timing and location. So if you see the tree behind me and some of the trees all around us, even in the distance, when the buds have opened and the leaves are coming out, but not fully, that's the time to go crappie fishing in southern Ontario. So I've got my rod runner, which is a really handy carrying device. I've got my 2 Duckett Crappie Slayers, and Barb's got a rod ready to go. We're using small grubs and jigs, and I've got a whole bunch of tackle. So we're going to be fishing probably for the next hour and a half. Maybe we'll fish into the dark. We'll see. But it'll be interesting to see with these bright sunny conditions if the crappie will move into a small creek. So the locations that I try to target this time of the year is shallow bays, like you see them behind me here. But because I didn't bring my waders or my boots, I can't really walk out. It's very marshy here. So we're going to be fishing a very small tributary that comes into the water right here. And I got a feeling that even now, the crappie are slowly moving in. So we're going to try to intercept them and see if we can catch some. There's a red-winged blackbird just on that tree to my right. Oh, another one. Man, I'm going to tighten my drag up a little bit. These are all decent crappie. Oh, it's gotten me into the... This one is a little smaller, but still, man. Can lift him up. Look at, isn't that a gorgeous fish? Gorgeous. Look at. Beautiful. Okay, you're going back. Oh, there's one. Ooh, slab. Look at this. That is a nice crappie. I think that's a 12-incher. I'm going to see if I can grab him here. Oh boy, he's a handful. Oh. Beautiful colors. Isn't that a gorgeous fish? You know, sometimes you find these jewel spots right on the side of the road. You can probably hear the cars going by. That is a really nice size crappie. And I got it on that. Look at, there's that little fry from Fishing Complete. I'll give you tips a little bit later. But right now I'm going to let this guy go. What a beautiful fish. Here we go. Gone. Be nice if there was another one in here. You know, whenever I'm fishing from shore or even from a boat, I always use the rod runner system. This is the one that you can get up here in Canada. It's rodrunner.ca. You can also go to, if you're in the US, to rodrunner.com. I've only got a couple rods on here today, and you can see that they're the ultralight rods by Duckett. And one thing that I like is that you can put the rods, doesn't matter how big of rods you use. I even use this in salt water. You can have them all pre-rigged with your lures. You can see that the rods are kept apart, even if you have up to 5 rods. And as a matter of fact, you can put up to 7 rods. You can see these grooves right here if you wanted to. So it's a really handy system, especially if you're moving from spot to spot. So let me tell you a little bit about the rod that I'm using. You know, I'm a true believer that you should be using the right outfit for the type of fishing that you're doing. So if I'm saltwater fishing in 100 feet of water and I got the chance of hooking some very large grouper and large snapper, I'm probably going to use a rod that's rated up to like 80-pound braid. So when it comes to fishing for smaller fish like panfish, I like using an ultralight. So this is the Duckett. It's called a Crappie Slayer, and you can see that I've matched it with their reel. And I like it because it's very light, number one, but also it has just the right curvature and the right action. So if I stand back a little bit, you'll see that if I shake it, it looks pretty stiff. But when I pull on it, the first about 20 inches bends, and then the rest of it, you have a really good strong spine. So I'm so confident with this rod that I can actually flip like 1 pound crappie and even some large perch. And even if I get the odd bass, you know, 2-3 pounds, I can actually flip them right on shore in the boat. The rod is that strong. So it's important, especially if you're not using a float. I use a float most of the time, but a lot of times when I'm searching for the panfish, I'll be casting just a small jig with a plastic grub, and I want to cast far, and it's very important for me to feel the tap, because a lot of the smaller panfish just inhale the lure. They don't grab it in turn. So as soon as you see a snap on your line, kind of like a small walleye, or there's a pause, or you feel a little tap, you should set the hook. And because this first 20 inches bends, it's perfect because you get a little bit of lag time. I think that's so important to let the fish close its mouth on it before you set the hook. Wow, what a beautiful crappie. Come on. How am I going to get him in here? Oh, I just heard a beaver to my right. Oh no. This is not like a pro does it here. Figures that I get a good sized fish, and he's actually being really good. And I just got a soaker, but I don't mind. So look at, this is funny. I tried to lift this fish up. It's pretty good size. Isn't that a gorgeous crappie? And I broke my line trying to lift it. So I'm going to have to be very careful. I don't know what my strategy is going to be. But look at how he inhaled that. Isn't that amazing? What a gorgeous fish. This is a nice eating size crappie, but I'm going to be releasing it. Beautiful fish. So it's going to be a toss back from here. There you go, crappie. Good. So I just learned a lesson there, not to try to lift the fish up. I'm going to try to drag it over those cattails next time. So we've got probably about half an hour of really good time to get these fish just before it gets dark, because then I won't be able to record anymore. Okay, I'm going to retie. We're going to go back at it. I just want to show you my little friend that can sometimes catch some pretty big panfish. This is a little spike. It's only about 1 inch long. It's made by Fishing Complete, and I have it on a special jig head. Now this one is called an aspirin. The reason called an aspirin, you can see it's like a round jig head with the sides cut off, and it has eyes on it. But if you were to try to put this little soft plastic on a normal jig head, it would split apart. So this is a really good tip. So here's one of my favorite jig heads that I like to use when I'm using a larger grub. You can see this is a 1/8 ounce. It's kind of a stand-up head, and it's got that really nice grub barb so that the fish can't pull the plastic back. But if I tried to put that little soft plastic on, it would tear it apart. So what I do is I look for jig heads that have a wire grub barb. You see how tiny that grub barb is? It still keeps the soft plastic on there, but when you're dealing with small soft plastics, I believe this is a 1/16 ounce jig head. I use these all the way up to like 5/8 ounce sometimes, depending how thick my plastics are. But any plastics that have a smaller diameter, like the spike that's right here, you're really best off to use a jig head that has a wire weed guard like this one. That way you'll be able to fish and catch lots of fish on that same soft plastic, and it won't come off. It'll give you the right presentation, and you'll probably catch more fish. Little juvenile. You know, even the small crappie are fun to catch. There. Look at pretty. I think they're so beautiful. Black crappie. Okay, there you go. Come on. Oh yeah. See if I can lift them up. Don't get caught in the cattails. There. Yeah, he would qualify as an eater. But we're going to let him go. Oh, he's getting dark. Look at that dark belly. Beautiful. Cooked lightly too. There's just something about crappie fishing. Look at it. Isn't that a gorgeous fish? Beautiful. Back he goes. I know you're saying they're great eating. You should be keeping them. You know what? I just like catching them for fun. When I'm using a float and a small jig, I like to use a small but buoyant float. This one is chartreuse in color. It's like a bright green. Right now, I don't see the color so well, but well, you can see it right there. It's buoyant, just perfect at the equator, so that if a crappie pulls it under, it won't feel the float at all. Most of the time when I'm fishing for panfish, especially earlier in the season, I'm fishing in shallow water. Most of the time it's water less than 4 feet deep. And most of the time I use a float because the weeds are just starting to grow. And eventually those same areas that I fish early in the year will be so weed choked later on in about a month that you can't even fish anymore and the fish move out. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the floats that I like to use. Now look at these floats. I don't know if you can see them here in between my face. They're kind of cute looking. They're both very simple floats. This particular one is a little bit more buoyant than this one. This one is made out of cork. This one is made out of a sponge material. You can see that I've used a very simple technique. This is just the actual shaft going through the float and the line's going through so I can move it up and down. This one, I have the line on the outside, much like when we steelhead fish. And I've got a little bit of tubing, like rubber tubing on it. So the most important thing when you're using floats for panfish is that you have them balanced properly. So when I say balanced, you know, most floats come with a line of where the water line should be, kind of like a water line on a boat, you know, when the boat sits in the water, when you're not too heavy or you're not too light. So it's very important. I call it the equator of the float or neutral buoyancy. So when you have it floating just right, where it's at the equator of the float, a fish feels very little resistance, even a larger panfish, when it goes to pull it down, and you can set the hook very easily. The reason I've got these two floats here, one is designed for a smaller jig, like a 1/32 ounce. One is designed for a 1/16 ounce. And a lot of times when I'm using the 1/16, when I'm searching for crappie, if there's weeds on the bottom, I'll actually cast out and I'll jig it and I'll move it towards me the whole time. Sometimes you don't have to do that. The crappie especially will just take a soft plastic that's just sitting there. But having the right float, you know, one thing that I really feel bad for people when I see either kids or adults using these big, you know, red and white plastic bobbers, and you'll see the bobber trying to go down, and you have no idea how big the fish is, but the fish can't pull the bobber down because it's almost like a Javax bottle, you know, or a milk plastic container. They can't pull it down because it's just too much buoyancy. So having the right float can make all the difference, and then you can catch fish. Duckett Crappie Slayer. Number one is the size. It comes in a few different sizes. It's extremely light and matched with a small reel designed to go with a Crappie Slayer. It's perfect. You can see I've got some blue braid on there. It's a very light line. But what I like about it here, I'll show you just the action on it. So the first, I'm going to say about maybe 20 inches, has got beautiful flex, but then look at how the strong spine down below. So it's perfect for crappie. And even if you get the occasional, you know, larger fish, like a largemouth bass, or even a pike, especially when we're fishing in the spring like this, or some big crappie, you know, 1 to 2 pounds. It can handle them no problem. But what I really like is the sensitivity. Casts well. It's got enough spine. Beautiful. Just the guides are spaced just right. And it's ideal for any kind of panfish fishing that you're going to be doing. Oh, good hit. Oh. See if it cannot break my line this time. We got a very active beaver out there. Man, they're just inhaling these grubs from Fishing Complete. This isn't as big as the other one, but still very nice crappie. I've got some grass on it. because I'm trying to lift him up over the cattails. Come on. And they're inhaling these jigs. I'll show you the jig in a minute here. Come on. Should pop out. There, just popped out. Look, nice little crappie. Beautiful fish. I've got that sun that's starting to go down in the distance. My wife Barb is fishing with me over there. And we're getting these beautiful crappie. This guy's going back. There he goes. So let me show you this, the little plastic grub that I'm using. This is from Fishing Complete. And you can see it's like a little paddle tail. And it's on a 1/16 ounce jig head. So I really like the action because when I twitch my float, that tail slaps back and forth. Then I've got a fluorocarbon leader right up to my float. And I'm only fishing about, I'm going to say 2.5 feet deep because this is a very shallow creek that's going into the bay here. So I'm just going to keep fishing. Hopefully get a few more before it gets dark. So we really don't care about keeping any. We've got lots of fish at home. So this is more about catching fish and having fun and throwing them back. You know, sometimes people make comments about lures and colors and so on. And one of the questions that I've had to answer over the years is, can fish see color? Well, yes and no. Some fish, like catfish, don't see very well. They rely mostly on the sense of smell and taste. And also their lateral line. But other fish, for example, like the sunfish family, which covers quite a few panfish, and bass also, they can see colors really well. And some of the best times to catch them is, you know, either midday or just after early morning or just before the sun goes down. So I'm just gonna give you a couple tips on some of the soft plastics that I use. One of my go-tos, believe it or not, is pink. Not sure why. I don't know how much pink stuff there is in the water, but for some reason, especially the panfish, they like pink. We also use these for steelhead fishing. So this is a little paddle tail. If I'm fishing it for panfish, what I'll do is I'll actually cut off so that I've only got about 1 inch of where the paddle tail is, and I'll use it. Sometimes I think the fish get bored, so you got to change up the presentation, change up the color, even the panfish, especially when they're schooling, because it seems like if one isn't interested, then the other ones go, maybe we shouldn't be hitting that. So one of the go-to colors is the white. This is one of the little spikes from Fishing Complete. And white is always a really good color because it takes on all colors, especially in shallow water. That's depending on the color of water. It kind of blends in. And for some reason, when it looks a little bit camouflaged, the fish hit it. And then, of course, under low light, or if the water's murky, this is one of my favorite colors to use, either chartreuse or chartreuse and pearl. And this is that lil fry from Fishing Complete. And it really darts and looks like a small bait fish. You'll notice that all of these are very tiny, except for, you know, the small paddle tail worm. So those I just cut down. But I find go with the color that you have the most confidence in when you start. If the water is clear, go with the natural color. Go like pink, you know, or even like a pumpkin seed color, or clear with flake. And if you're dealing with early in the morning or late in the evening, use a bright color. Use like chartreuse. And then during the middle of the day, and I've caught quite a few crappie and other panfish, big pumpkin seeds and bluegill in the middle of the day. A lot of times it's on white, you know, and even chartreuse. So it's a matter of experimenting, but colors can make a really big difference. And sometimes I also use a combination. I'll use a different color jig head with the color of plastics that I'm using. Some days I'll match the jig head with the color of the plastic. And it always seems to make a little bit of a difference. I'm always tinkering until I find the right ingredient. Another little crappie. That guy hit very close to the cattails. There he goes.